Today on the Inside Scoop, Oregon surging after landing the top quarterback in America. We'll talk Notre Dame five-star buzz, Texas A&M and Alabama impact freshmen, plus a Rivals ranking update. We got newly minted five stars and some big movers. But before we start today, a total sprint this morning. I didn't have time for breakfast, so Huel handled it for me. Quick meal in a bottle. Link is in the description, and if your mornings look like mine, you'll want to click on it. Let's talk Oregon. It's Will Menzel Day on Scoop Duck. So we got Max Torres here about an hour ago right here on this channel. Will Menzel, Rivals' #1 quarterback, ended his recruitment. It was a winding recruitment. It is now, though, Oregon's. And Will Menzel is a Duck out of Chandler, Arizona. What do we love about Will Menzel in this Oregon commitment? Why is it a great fit?
There's a lot to like about Will Menzel landing in Eugene for this Oregon fan base, Josh. I think he does a lot of different things well. For starters, I think he's really just got it between the ears. Really, really sharp kid. Love the way that he carries himself. Certainly knowledgeable of the offense. You would think that's the case for any quarterback, but this is a guy who's got plenty of moxie. That's one of the words that repeatedly came up in my conversations with sources on Will Menzel. A guy who was really unbothered about just kind of everything that goes on, all the bells and whistles with modern day recruiting, really stuck to his process. But as far as on the field, he's got some really, really good arm talent, isn't necessarily going to throw the ball 70 yards for you, but he can do everything you want as a quarterback. Also has, I think, plus side athleticism, is more athletic than you would maybe give him credit for. I think that was one of the things that stuck out to me when I was watching his tape, is just the impact that he had with his legs on the ground, and certainly a guy that players gravitate towards, and he's really just got that will to win. So there's a lot to like about this new pickup for the Ducks.
Yeah, and one of the things that, looking at his player card on Rivals, Charles Power, director of scouting and ranking, has him comparable to Bo Nix. Now, this wasn't something that changed. He's had this on his profile for weeks, if not months. Do you agree with the Bo Nix comparison, and why? What do you think? Or is there a better one?
Yeah, I that is a comparison that I've heard in some of my conversations covering this recruitment leading up to the decision for Menzel. And I think that maybe Bo Nix is a better runner than Menzel, but they certainly have some similar frame. Menzel is 6'3", 207 pounds. I think Nix is maybe closer to 6'2". So for the Oregon offense, you want a guy that is mobile, but doesn't necessarily have to be a dual threat guy. Can he extend plays? That's really what the Ducks want in their signal caller, and that's what Menzel can do. So I don't know if I would necessarily make that comparison myself, but that is something that I heard kind of talking to sources behind the scenes on this one.
All right, so the logical next question is, who's going to catch passes from Will Menzel at Oregon?
There's a lot of guys that Oregon's in the mix for here in the 2027 class. No one's committed just yet.
Right.
No commitments in for Ross Douglas, the wide receivers coach, but I like my Rivals prediction for Dakota Garant out of Harper Woods, Michigan. That's kind of been the receiver most closely linked to the Ducks here in the 2027 cycle. Kyle Whittingham and the Wolverines over there in Ann Arbor, Michigan, are making the big push right now. That's who I view as Oregon's biggest competition for Dakota Garant. You also have Julian Caldwell out of the state of Texas, someone who is very high on the Ducks, but it looks like Texas Tech has kind of created some separation in that recruitment. A couple other names to watch here, Josh, at receiver. You have Julius Jones Jr. out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, St. Thomas Aquinas. He might be a Notre Dame legacy, but Oregon is giving him plenty to think about here in his recruiting process. Ross Douglas has been recruiting him since he was a freshman, I believe, if not as a sophomore. So the Ducks have been in the mix there, even if Ross Douglas wasn't necessarily on staff just yet. He was over at Syracuse prior to coming to Eugene. And then the other name I would definitely think is worth watching is Xavier Sabb out of New Jersey. He's all the way in the Northeast, but he continues to have a lot of great things to say about Oregon and his recruitment, as well as Blake Wong from Southern California, or Norco, California. He has an official visit set with the Ducks, and I think he's their top West Coast option right now.
Yeah, so about 2 weeks ago, the recruiting was slowing down a little bit for Oregon. USC landed a couple recruits, and the Scoop Duck message board was freaking out about it. Oregon now, though, with their 4th commitment of the month, and now Will Menzel, #1 quarterback, Are we in the middle of an Oregon Ducks heater right now? Because it feels like there could be more to come. Is there more to come?
I think so. I mean, things are certainly shaping and tracking well for Oregon here in the 2027 class. And this has typically been Oregon's MO, Josh. A lot of stuff happens early for some of these other schools. You look at Oklahoma, you look at USC, some of the other schools that have really started to load up here in the 2027 class. But Oregon is very selective, very strategic with the way that they operate and who they're willing to really make a push on. So I do think that this is kind of the start of something for the Ducks here in the spring, final week of spring ball out there in Eugene. And the one that I kind of have my eye on right now is Samaj Stanford, the four-star safety out of Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. He's set to announce his college commitment on Thursday, so not too long here on the heels of the Will Mental commitment. Yeah. He's got Oregon, Texas, and Georgia as his finalists. And I recently allotted a prediction, along with Steve Wiltfong and Sam Spiegelman, for the Ducks to go into the state of Oklahoma to land the top 100 prospect who was on campus for Oregon earlier on this spring to see a practice. So that's kind of one that they've been, waiting in the weeds for, kind of lurking in the shadows for, and the buzz is starting to come in on the Oregon end for him.
All right, yeah, and if you kind of take a step back and you look at where this recruiting momentum is, it's all leading up to this Oregon spring game, and it kind of makes sense that as Oregon spring got cranked up, so did recruiting, and now spring game this weekend, as you said, in Eugene. Who are some of the headliners you're expecting on campus?
Yeah, the spring game isn't really going to be the marquee recruiting event that it has been in the past, Josh, but there are certainly still some really good prospects that are coming out to Eugene. Heck, most of this 2027 recruiting class is going to be on campus. A couple of guys, you look at Rashad Streets, a top edge rusher out of the state of North Carolina, one of the newest commits for the Ducks. Kadarius McMiller, the touted running back out of Tyler, Texas. He's going to be on campus, as is Zane Rowe, the defensive lineman from Texas. But for some of the uncommitted guys, the top targets for the Ducks, you have Ishmael Kamara, four-star offensive lineman from the state of Texas. He's going to be making his way out to Eugene. And again, Oregon, I think, has been kind of quietly in a better spot there than some people have given them credit for, with the in-state Texas schools commanding most of the buzz, as well as LSU, I believe. They're mentioned pretty heavily in that recruitment. Kasai Curry, a four-star defensive lineman from Sierra Canyon, same school as Marcus Fakatau, coveted defensive lineman that the Ducks are also heavily recruiting in the 2027 class. And then you have Alabama Thompson safety, Junior Tuopo. He's going to be making it out to Oregon. He has the Ducks in his top group, but I think the Ducks are maybe trailing Auburn in that recruitment.
All right, Oregon fans, talk with us. How you guys feeling? Will Mental on board. Who is your top wide receiver target? Let us know who you got as a priority. Put it in the comments section below. Let's talk Notre Dame. It is a heck of a week for Notre Dame recruiting. We're going to talk about the 5 stars on campus. But first, Mike, it sounds like Notre Dame is closing in on their quarterback for 2027 because Champ Mons, the predictions are rolling in, the Florida quarterback being predicted to Notre Dame. So maybe the question isn't if, but when. What are you hearing in terms of a timeline when Champ Mons could make a decision?
Yeah, when going into his visit, this past weekend, you heard that Peter Bork, the talented quarterback from the Northeast, was going to be visiting that upcoming Tuesday, and then he canceled his visit.
Yeah.
Or I should say Notre Dame canceled his visit. It's like, all right, this is a matter of if, not when. I think it would take a colossal collapse if Notre Dame doesn't get this one over the line. I would assume, today's April 22nd. I would assume sometime in the next 5-7 days, Mons will make a decision. Florida State and Ohio State, obviously the other two schools that he's keen on. But yeah, I give the Irish the edge in my predictions on Notre Dame.
All right. So what will this mean for the class? Because this is technically the second 2027 quarterback to commit. Technically.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously Teddy Gerard was their guy last summer, and then he reclassified to 2026. Notre Dame doesn't really have right now that main face leader of the class who's publicly recruiting. So he would definitely be that. And Notre Dame is very active in the state of Florida right now, especially in South Florida. So, he's got, a receiver target, just a little bit south of him, and Julius Jones Jr., St. Thomas Aquinas, that he'll definitely be recruiting if Mons does pick Notre Dame. So Notre Dame is hot after Julius Jones. I've had a prediction in for him to land at Notre Dame since last October. You got Cade Cooper from Pennsylvania. Notre Dame really likes. They just offered Jackson Coleman out in the Denver area in Colorado. Brendan Lacey's a talented athlete out in Texas that they like. They were originally recruiting him as a running back, now after him as like an offensive athlete / wide receiver. And of course, Notre Dame is very active at the tight end spot. Jackson Dollar, Notre Dame would love to have. That looks like a Georgia Fighting Irish battle with his commitment coming around the corner. Titus Hawk from Oklahoma is another big tight end target for the Irish, and they also would love to have Malik Howard in Tennessee. So, Notre Dame doesn't have any tight end commits, doesn't have any receiver commits. They're between those two positions. I'd guess they take 5. And yeah, if Champmons commits here soon, he's going to be put right to work.
Oh, yeah, it sounds like it. All right, Mike, it is a big week on campus. We got 5 stars. We got elite players all coming to South Bend this week. Last week is David Fall Run Show, but we got more. Starting with Abraham Cisse, one of the top edges in the country. We got offensive tackle Olu Babola out of St. Peter's Prep in New Jersey. Marcus Fakatu, the defensive lineman from California that everybody is after. So where do we even start? Let's start with Abraham Cisse. Where do the Irish sit in this recruitment?
He actually arrived on Wednesday, so a midweek visit for him. But my pick is on Notre Dame. I've had that one in for a while. Steve Wolfong has as well. He's got other schools, the likes of Penn State, LSU. There's definitely others very much in the mix. But I think that Notre Dame is going to make a huge jump with him during his midweek visit. You talk about Olu. Notre Dame recently offered the 5-star from St. Peter's Prep in New Jersey. We'll get a better sense. It's that first visit, first introduction. I don't know how much the staff had. I don't know if offensive line coach Joe Rudolph went to go see him in January contact period or anything like that. So we should get a better sense after this weekend. And then with Marcus Fakatu, it's Adam Gorney does an incredible job covering that recruitment. It seems like Gorney, my buddy, is writing an article on Marcus every other day. He just put one out early on Wednesday, and there was all sorts of new intel. So that one seems like the biggest roller coaster. This team,
he takes a ton of visits.
He does take a lot of visits, and I don't mean this in a bad way at all. He's very impressionable. So he takes this visit, that school jumps up. He hasn't been to Notre Dame since I believe last fall. So Notre Dame going into the spring visits seemed like the top school, or right up there, in the top 2. Now it's, the Texases and the Oregons. Notre Dame slipped down. I think that Notre Dame's going to make a big jump this weekend. I think a lot of what he and his family are looking for, they'll find at Notre Dame. We'll see, what happens. And the financial piece is obviously going to be big for a 5-star like him. But I think that Notre Dame's going to really impress him. And, when you visit for a game day, Josh, this. The game day visits are great, but you don't get as much out of those as you do the off-season visits when you get to spend all the time with the coaches. You get to go in depth in facilities. You get to have all these meetings and academics and all these kind of things. So I think he's going to leave campus really impressed with Notre Dame, and I think Notre Dame will make a big jump. Do I think he lands at Notre Dame? I don't know, Josh. It'll again continue to be a roller coaster.
That one's all over the board. Adam does a great job. It seems like he's covering him every day, but that's because he's doing a visit recap nearly every day of the week. True. So he continues to take visits. We'll continue to cover it. Let's wrap this up with going back to last week, David Fall Run Show. So if Marcus Fakatu seems like maybe, 50-50 right now, are you ready to pencil in David Fall Run Show into this class?
Pencil in, sure, because I have an eraser. I've got him picked to Notre Dame. There's a lot of guys I have predicted to Notre Dame. I might need to cool it a little bit, but like Cisse, Follow Run Show. I don't have one for Marcus, but I do like Notre Dame. I think as Follow Run Show's recruitment is unfolded, when Texas Tech gets really involved with the defensive lineman, it's like, oh, okay. We know Texas Tech is a big spender. So that kind of gives you a little bit of pause. There's Miami's in the mix for Follow Around Show too. That's another one to watch. But his head coach played at Notre Dame. The president of his school played at Notre Dame, and his trainer played at Notre Dame.
I did not.
He goes to a school called Chicago St. Patrick. There's a lot going in Notre Dame's favor there. So I think he's going to end up with the Irish. But when Texas Tech is involved with a 5-star defensive lineman, Josh, it gets tricky.
All right, you guys, you're the real recruiting experts. Get in the comment section. Let us know which of these 5 stars are going to end up with the Irish. Put it in the comments below. Let's talk Buckeye recruiting coming out of the Ohio State spring game. Chad Simmons here. You had a great article up on Rivals.com highlighting some of the key targets that were at the spring game that Ohio State made a move with. So, Chad, let's start right at the top. Who do you think Ohio State made the biggest move with over the weekend?
I'd say probably two guys, Josh. I think obviously you start in-state, Glenville High School, kind of a feeder program to Ohio State over the years. Local kid, was offered a little bit over a month ago in Columbus. Kaylon Bailey, 6'2", 220, edge linebacker, kind of move around, versatile defender, was back in Columbus. And, I think all signs point right now towards him ending up a Buckeye, as many guys that came out of Glenville have over the years. And also a guy out of state, Wyatt Smith, a top 100 guy for us in the Rivals 300 from St. Thomas Aquinas down in South Florida. His first time on campus in Columbus, he loved it. Spent time with Larry Johnson, they people call him the living legend defensive line coach, from his production over the years for the NFL and development there at Ohio State. And a day after that visit, he locked in an OV for Ohio State for June 5th. So two guys to watch for sure, I think, that have a chance to end up in this Ohio State recruiting class.
All right, what else? What other intel you got coming out of the weekend on guys maybe trending towards Ohio State?
Staying with the Florida theme, that they love to recruit that state. We all know about Jeremiah Smith, where he came from, Carnell Tate, Brandon Ennis, the list goes on about guys they recruit in South Florida. A teammate of Wyatt Smith, Jaden Carey, a DB, versatile, listed as a corner, can play safety as well. He was there. He told me nobody is coming harder than Ohio State right now in his recruitment. I would give Ohio State the edge over Auburn and some other schools right now for Jaden Carey. They opened the eyes of a defensive lineman, Tyler Alexander, down from Wellington High School in Palm Beach, Florida. His first time on campus. Again, Larry Johnson, when he speaks, guys, listen. He really kind of connected with Larry Johnson. They'll get an OV from Tyler as well. And they kind of came from outside to now a top 5 school for Tyler Alexander.
All right, so before we get out of this segment, now when it comes to Ohio State running back talk, it starts with David Gabriel Georges. We know he is one of the top targets at running back for the Buckeyes, but Chad, there's another name that you think Ohio State fans should be familiar with as well.
Keep an eye on Nigel Newkirk for sure. I mean, he's a guy that we moved up in a big way in the rankings earlier this year from Gainesville, Georgia. Have seen him play multiple times the last couple of years. He's big. He's fast. He makes that good one cut, makes guys miss, runs with power, can catch the ball out of the backfield. So a lot of teams are pushing for Newkirk, and Ohio State is one of those. And he loved that trip to Columbus like all kids do, but he talked about his time with Coach Lachlan. He even talked about how they teach guys to cook. He said he's never learned how to cook in his life, but just the detail at Ohio State, the people, his comfort level. Look, Alabama's up there, some other programs too, but Ohio State made a big move over the weekend.
Yeah, big moves are coming for Ohio State. So Buckeye fans, make sure you guys are subscribed to this channel. Just last Friday, Jimmy Kalis committed right here on the Rivals Recruits channel. We got you covered all off season long. There was an update to the Rivals 300 recruiting rankings on Monday. So I got Chad Simmons here, and we're just going to get into the intel on some of the top uncommitted names, some of the hottest names of the offseason. So let's start with the top offensive tackle in the land, Mark Matthews, 5-star from South Florida, but he could end up leaving the state.
Yeah, he'll play in the heat somewhere, probably either South Florida Heat or Texas Heat with Texas A&M. I think, obviously LSU and Georgia round out his top 4, but it's shaping up to be, Miami versus Texas A&M, Mike Elko versus Mario Cristobal. He was there for 3+ days in College Station last week. A lot of buzz about the amount of ground that A&M made up last week with Mark Matthews. Now, look, I still feel Miami's going to be tough to beat. Look, he's a local guy, St. Thomas Aquinas. He's been to Miami countless times. He has the connection with Mirabal, Cristobal, multiple players on that team at Miami. But look, A&M made this race very interesting last week. He'll take OVs to all 4 schools, then make that decision. But right now, A&M is Miami's biggest competition.
And both those teams kind of battling for the number 1 class in America. So the battle for the number 1 class in America could go through Mark Matthews. That'll be a fun one to watch. Chad, Do you get a sense on when he could decide?
Yeah, I think he'll be, one of those midsummer guys. I really think he's kind of being methodical. He has a plan, slowly narrowed his list down. He was at Georgia 2 weeks ago. He was at A&M last week. I think he'll go in and take the 4 OVs, come back home, figure it out. And I would say even crunch the numbers. It'll be a big number for him with the NIL world for Mark Matthew and figure out what place is best for him. I think probably in that early July, range.
Gotcha. All right. Moving on to another 5-star, this time out of the state of North Carolina, where we got cornerback Joshua Dobson, another national recruit.
Yeah, he came out recently with his top 5 schools. LSU, we feel, is leading the way still. He was back in Baton Rouge over the weekend. Loves that connection with Corey Raymond. Obviously, he has that resume of producing DBs to the NFL, first-round draft picks. He likes to fit in Blake Baker's defensive scheme there at LSU. Auburn's involved, Texas A&M. Keep an eye on South Carolina. They made a very big move. They want to have a big season this year in the fall under Shane Beamer. Keep an eye on South Carolina. Michigan's kind of entered the race as a top 5 school, but right now it looks to be a 3-team battle at the top with LSU leading A&M and South Carolina for Josh Dobson.
Wow. All right. Now let's go to 4-star tight end, maybe the most talked about tight end on this channel, Jackson Dollar. He's been taking some trips, but recently he was in Athens.
Yeah, somebody has to talk about him. He does not talk about himself, doesn't do a lot of interviews, kind of stays pretty quiet, hasn't released, official, OVs yet, what dates, what he's going to do. But he did confirm to us that he is looking to commit, quote unquote, pretty soon. We've heard, maybe end of April, first part of May, no set date just yet. But what that does is probably paint a pretty good picture for Georgia because they were the last school to have him on campus over the weekend. He saw the tight ends put on a show at the G-Day spring game. He's been there multiple times. He is a top target regardless of position for Georgia. Obviously, he likes their success under Todd Hartley, how they use the tight end in the offensive scheme. But I'm told, Clemson's been talked about as well as a school to watch, but I'm told it's Notre Dame, Miami, and Georgia as the 3 strong contenders, with Georgia having some momentum.
All right, now let's head to New Jersey, St. Peter's Prep, where there is a monster offensive tackle, Olu Bobola, and he is out of New Jersey, big-time recruit because he's about 6'7", 310 pounds. He's also Rivals number 3 ranked offensive tackle in America. What's the latest on Olu's recruitment?
He's been zigzagging the country all spring, Josh. And I think entering the spring visit period, A&M was leading. I think closing out this period, A&M still leads. And we talk about these schools a lot. You mentioned them before, A&M and Miami. I would put Miami as a big mover this spring, having him on campus. I think Ole Miss is a school to watch. Florida, Nebraska, a few others. He's still working to kind of finalize his OVs, but I'm told that I think Miami and A&M will definitely get OVs. A&M has been setting the pace in their race rate going back into the fall, into the season, but Miami's kind of closed that gap, as some others have as well, to make it much more interesting. But right now, A&M, I feel, leads Miami.
Yeah, it's early.
Again,
still a lot of teams involved in that recruitment. Speaking of somebody that's been taking some visits, how about our number 1 linebacker, Caden Henderson out of Tampa Jesuit? He was down at Miami, but he's been to Notre Dame. This recruitment is all over the board. How do you see it?
Yeah, it's been pretty fluid, Josh. We rewind back to early when the calendar rolled over to the new year. A&M kind of was setting the pace. Some other schools like Alabama, Florida State, other programs involved as we kind of move through January into March, now into April. He's on an OV right now as we talk at LSU. They're kind of a dark horse in this race, a midweek visit, the first OV. LSU will set the bar very high. But the school now gaining the most momentum is Notre Dame. He was there over the weekend, a 3-day visit, had his family with him. They're a Catholic family. He goes to a Catholic high school. Notre Dame checked a lot of boxes for Caden Henderson, not just him, but his mom and dad as well. And they have put themselves right in the thick of this race with Miami and Texas A&M, the 2 teams that have been battling again for Caden Henderson at the top of his list. And then to kind of cap that off with Notre Dame, they get the last OV before he wants to make that decision on June 19th later on this summer. So look, Miami in-state school has really made a big run this year. I thought they kind of had some momentum over A&M a few weeks ago. But Notre Dame is the hot topic now with Caden Henderson. We'll see if LSU can kind of change that and swing it their way later on this week.
Man, Caden Henderson's recruitment has blown up this offseason. And like you said, we got about 6 to 8 weeks left of that recruitment, so we'll continue to watch it. Now, let's talk about 4-star running back David Gabriel Georges. I know 2 teams that have him on their top of their board, Ohio State and Tennessee. Is there really anybody else involved? I know teams would love to have him. I mean, is David really giving any attention to any other programs?
Yeah, I think he's courteous with maybe answering some phone calls and text here and there, and he will probably take more than 2 OVs when it comes down to it. But I think you said it, Josh. I mean, I don't see him going anywhere else other than Knoxville or Columbus. I mean, it's going to be a lot. It reminds me a lot of Savion Hyder a year ago.
Yeah.
Michigan, Tennessee, take the visits, NIL battle. It's going to be, I think, a lot like that. The OVs will mean a lot, not just because of, just getting on campus, but those business talks about, hey, what can you do for me, now in the NIL world, helping me build my brand, promote my name, and make money at the end of the day. He is an elite player. He's going to get paid this cycle, as all these guys are that we're talking about today, but hard to see him going anywhere else than Buckeye Land or up there at the 865 at the University of Tennessee. He's a Canadian. Some people think, Ohio State has the advantage because it's closer to home and his family up north. But both Tennessee and Ohio State has had success at that school down in Chattanooga over the years. I think this one will go all the way until OVs, and some big talks will happen in June and July.
All right, so everybody in the comments section, there's a lot of opinions, Chad, on where David Gabriel Georges will go, either Tennessee or Ohio State. Do you have an opinion to share with the comments section on where you think he will ultimately land?
I mean, I think it's hard, man, because I think it's hard to pick against either one of those schools. Look, Tennessee lost Savion Hyder last year. They didn't sign a running back in that cycle last year.
Right.
They went light in the portal this year. Now, they do have some bodies in there. They don't have anybody like DGG. I think he could start this year, game 1 for the University of Tennessee. Look, Ohio State's made their case as well. Their room is welcoming. He can play with Bo Jackson for a year, then be a guy that RB1 the next year. Look, both have compelling cases. I might lean slightly towards Tennessee, but it's a very close, super tight race that I don't think will be decided until commitment time.
All right. You convinced me. Honestly, when I asked you that question, I was kind of leaning Ohio State. But I think you're right, because I think you got 2 programs that are willing to spend, but they're not going to spend insanely, right? And Tennessee has been poignant in where they do spend their money. You had Nico, then you had David Sanders. Last year, obviously, Tristan Keys. And I think this year, David Gabriel Georges makes a lot of sense. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I'm leaning Tennessee. You guys, you let us know in the comment section below. Now, I see you got 4-star edge Jaden Bryant, but he's committed to LSU. Is there cause for concern here with LSU fans, and what other programs are trying to flip him?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put it in those terms as, cause of concern. But look, he's taken visits. He's been to Miami. He's taken an OV back to Miami. He's going to Texas A&M for an OV. Yes, he was back in Baton Rouge soon. But look, or recently, he committed to LSU without ever being on campus at LSU.
Yeah,
so he's got a love for LSU. He loves the staff. He feels good every time. He's been there a couple of times now since committing at the Under Armour All-America game. But he's also been to South Carolina, A&M, Miami. He's got OVs. South Carolina was the team to beat. What obviously, put that was the coaching changes to LSU's way and getting them on the map per se. But, I wouldn't say cause of concern, but definitely one to watch, one to monitor. I'm told that, all 3 of those schools are in consistent communication, talking about Miami, A&M, and Carolina. Of course, LSU is as well. But he's not locked in. There's not too many of those guys out there like that have shut things down. So I think as long as he's taking visits, you have to be alert that he's still looking to some extent.
All right, good stuff. Let's do one more prospect. One of the hottest names in Georgia, linebacker Joachim Gouda. We've talked about him a bit on this channel, but since then he's taken a bunch of visits. What do you make of his recruitment? When do you think he'll ultimately decide?
Yeah, I think he's looking at late June. He wants to kind of take the OVs, take a little bit of time, and make that decision as soon as possible. He's not a big, spotlight type of guy, doesn't self promote. He doesn't want to make a big deal about his recruitment, but it's a very, very big deal. And it reminds me a little bit of, Tyler Atkinson a year ago. Everybody was kind of pointing Georgia.
Yeah.
But his last visit was to Texas, where Tyler Atkinson ended up at when he committed in July last year. I'm told that Texas has come on extremely strong.
Oh boy.
They made a very compelling case to him and his family about why he should be a Longhorn last week when he was on campus. But I still go back to Georgia as being the team that others, including Texas, have to beat. There's some confidence at Florida. They can get this one done. Auburn is recruiting him as hard as anyone. He'll take the OVs to all four of those schools. But look, Georgia kind of jump-started his recruitment, offering him early in January. Next thing you know, he has Tennessee, Alabama, Auburn, Texas, Florida, so on. And he's been to Georgia the most. He's an in-state guy. He loves that development. The best connection is with Glenn Schumann. So look, you can't sleep on any of these schools, especially Texas. I'm told after that visit last week. But again, I think his recruitment starts with the in-state school, the University of Georgia.
All right, you guys, that was a ton of intel, but Chad's story is much bigger than this. He hits on like another 10 names, so go check that out on the front page of Rivals.com. But also get in the comment section, talk to us about some of the names that we did discuss. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let us know, comment section below. We got an update to the Rivals 300, and we're going to talk in this video, though, about the newly minted 5 stars. I got Alan True, National Scout, National Analyst here with us, and there's 2 uncommitted names here, David Fallaruncho and Abraham Cisse, both on that defensive line. We're not going to discuss those 2 today. We're going to talk about some of the committed names that are now 5 stars. Let's start on the West Coast. We're going all the way out to California. Dante Wright, who's committed to the other coast, he's committed to Georgia. Why is Dante Wright now a 5-star?
Yeah, I mean, I think just a really, really good athlete. As we looked at the defensive backs in this class, he was one of the best movers among that group. And we knew during the season last year, also a track guy who runs 10.6, 10.7. But then I think what really cemented is the way he changes directions, his fluidity. He showed that at the opening LA, and that really cemented his status as a 5-star, not just a straight line guy. He can do all the backpedaling and the change of direction needed to play corner in the SEC. And we just felt like that combination of athleticism made him an elite player.
All right. Now, Seneca Driver, we love him as a tight end. So do the Oklahoma Sooners. They landed him. So Seneca Driver, now a 5-star. Why?
Yeah, I actually have had a chance to see him in person, and he's every bit of his listed 6'6", if not pushing towards 6'7", 240 pounds. And in that size, outstanding athlete, explosive. You watch him play basketball, he's getting up the floor and dunking. He probably could play some level of college basketball. He's been an impact guy since his freshman season. And I think that's what makes him so exciting and what makes him a 5-star is the fact that he's already a really good high school player, but there's still room for him to get better. So he's not even close to his ceiling and already a problem for his high school opponents. So he's just an elite, explosive athlete with a future NFL frame.
Got it. All right. The next man up is Edge Mekhi Brown. He earned his 5-star status on the football field. We told him about his 5-star status when he was on this channel committing to USC. So he is now a Trojan. Mekhi Brown, also a 5-star recruit. Tell us about it.
Yeah, prototype pass rusher, this new age pass rusher who can play standing up. And just everything I just said about Seneca Driver applies to Mekhi Brown as well. Really, really good basketball player. You see the athleticism and the explosiveness on the court. That translates over to football, where he's got a really good first step, changes directions really well, really tough to deal with for offensive tackles to block because of that first step and his finesse and his change of direction. He's a guy that put up 10 sacks last year, but I think can still get even better. His comp on his profile is Quentin Coples. Some of you may have to Wikipedia that one, but I think it's a really good comp. Reminds me of Jason Pierre-Paul a little bit as well. Just one of those big pterodactyls playing edge.
All right, up next, the number one safety in the land, or at least the number one safety on Rivals, Kamori Dorsey, out of Georgia, and he made an early commitment in November to Texas A&M, and that kind of set the tone for the Aggies, that they were going to compete for the number one class in America. Dorsey, a big reason why. So why is he now a 5-star?
Yeah, I think in contrast to some of the last guys we talked about, where we talked a lot about upside and what they can become, I think Dorsey's probably one of the more higher floor finish type prospects that's in this class. 6'2", 205 pounds. So going to step in ready to play. Looks like he could play college ball right now. And we're in where you have safeties who are more coverage guys or more box guys. He can do a little bit of both. He's shown that he's very capable when the ball's in the air, can also step down, support the run. It's also a really good offensive player who I think could play at the power 4 level as a wide receiver as well. So overused term is box checker, but really this guy doesn't have very many weaknesses. And so when we went down the list of safeties, he was the guy that we felt checked just about every box there was.
All right, so those are the newly minted 5-stars. There will be more updates. There will be more 5-stars by the end of the cycle. There will be 32 5-stars, so continue to check in on our rankings as the updates keep rolling in. All right, let's now talk about big movers. I love the rankings update, and I love to talk about the biggest movers. We'll start with offensive tackle Antonio Berry out of Tupelo, Mississippi, now checking in at 32 overall. So if the cycle were to end today, Berry would be 5-star status.
Yeah, and I think after the first, Mark Matthews, top tackle, been that way for a while. There's some wiggle room after that. I thought there was a really good group of tackles and from anywhere down from 2 down to 9, but Berry was the big jumper. He now is the number 5 offensive tackle. He could still go up even further. And I know people like to think we overrate these camps, but when you have really, really good film like Antonio Berry has, then you go to a camp like Under Armour New Orleans and you put up a time like a sub 4.7 shuttle. There is really high correlation between big offensive tackles who can move that well. That is a really, really good shuttle time. Between that, the video from that, plus his junior film last year, he was a guy who we felt had such a high ceiling that it bumped him up quite a bit above a lot of other offensive tackles.
All right, now I want to talk about a Texas Tech commitment that is now rated as the number 4 linebacker and 41 overall. So just outside what would be 5-star status, but number 41 overall in that top 50. We're talking elite of the elite. Linebacker Jaden Nelson out of Houston, Texas. What do we love about his game?
Yeah, I think the athleticism, again, the ability to play in space, which is so important for linebackers now to never need to come off the field. We saw that on his tape. Then again, he goes to an event and verifies that, backs it up, goes to Rivals Houston, runs 4.63 in the 40, broad jumps 10.9, over 35-inch vertical. And then you turn on the film and he's playing way out in space like a defensive back. Sometimes they're blitzing him, they're rushing him off the edge. You can play inside the box. So many different things that he can do, and I think he's going to add the weight necessary. But that athletic ability, that explosiveness, and the versatility are all what made him debut pretty high already within the Rivals 300, the previous update, and then bumped him up even further in this one.
All right, one more big mover to talk about, and that's Indiana Hoosier commitment, Montana Torbert. He's out of Cincinnati, Ohio, now checking in as the number 10 corner in America, number 70 overall, top 100 recruit now, committed to the Indiana Hoosiers.
Yeah, he's another guy that keeps climbing. He was a pretty high debuter initially in the Rivals 300. Then we had a chance to see him at the opening Indianapolis. He was Rivals as MVP of that event. And I think, when you look at events like an opening regional, cornerback is one position where it translates pretty well, because if you can cover receivers one-on-one in that setting, no pass rush, no safety help, usually that translates quite well. I think the colleges certainly agree with us as you see a big group of schools starting to try to flip him from Indiana. So far, they've been able to hang on to his commitment, but a guy who can play man-to-man, can play off-man, and another really, really good mover. Great change of direction and has excellent ball skills as well. So that's what has him moving up so high within our Rivals 300.
Yeah, and those are some of the big movers in the Rivals 300. Go check out the front page of Rivals.com if you want to check out all of our rankings after the latest update. All right, now let's discuss Will Menzel. Not only is our number one quarterback, but now, just moments ago, about an hour ago, he committed to the Oregon Ducks right here on this channel. So what are the Ducks getting in Will Menzel, and why has Rivals had him as our number one overall quarterback?
Yeah, so I think they're getting a guy who understands the position. And, it sounds funny to say that, but it's super important in a time where sometimes you can overrate quarterbacks on arm strength or athleticism. You still have to be able to process the game. And he does that at a very high level, takes great care of the football, completed over 70% of his passes a year ago. Then you see him go to an event like the Navy All-American Bowl, similarly very efficient there, very poised, never looks like the moment's too big for him. And then you add on top of that the fact that he's a great athlete. He's a great runner. I think when you look at the last couple quarterbacks that Oregon has had success with, I scouted Dante Moore, live here in the state of Michigan. He was a high-level processor. Before that, they had a guy who was a more mobile guy in Dylan Gabriel. I think Will Menzel combines some of those traits. So I think it's a really, really good fit for Oregon. And they're getting a kid who I think is really advanced in terms of how he views, understands, and plays the position.
Yeah, Will Menzel from Chandler, Arizona, headed to Eugene. Is there another quarterback, maybe at Oregon, maybe from the Big Ten, that you would kind of compare Will Menzel's game to?
Yeah, Charles Power actually put down on his page Bo Nix, which I think is a very apt comparison, because Bo, also a guy who processes the game very well, understands the game, understands the position, but also is athletic, can move, make some plays with his feet, and I think that's what Will brings to the table.
Texas A&M recruiting, football. We're talking impact freshmen in this video, and I got Alan True here to tell me who from the Aggies 2026 signing class is going to make an impact on the field this season as a true freshman. Alan, let's start on the offensive side of the ball. Who you got?
I think there's one easy one, and that's wide receiver Aaron Gregory. He's been one of the stars of spring practice, not just of the true freshman. I think of anybody on the roster, he's really made some big plays. There was a clip that went viral on social media of him making a catch in between two defenders, then had some flashes in the spring game as well. They have a strong receiver room coming back. Isaiah Horton's been a big addition, but I think Aaron's going to have a chance to play. 6'3", with a big catch radius, runs great routes, and has good positional skills. So I think he's a guy that you're going to be able to see make an impact for them on the field this year. Also an opportunity for a running back, probably KJ Edwards, to get some carries. But I think Aaron Gregory's by far the most likely freshman that will play on the offensive side of the ball.
All right. Yeah. Love this class all around. 27 total signees for Texas A&M. Now, not all of them can play early, but how about on the defensive side of the ball? Who you got? Who do you think makes an impact?
Yeah, I think there's a handful of guys there. I think right now with the injury to Damian Sanford, I think at linebacker, there's some opportunity. And Tamarian Watkins has already flashed quite a bit. Former safety, but was a big hitter in high school, so you knew he was going to be able to move down into the box. Really good speed, shows great instincts. He's going to add some weight. He's got that 6'3" frame, but he's really flashed hard in the spring. And I think that with the injury to Sanford, they're going to need somebody to step up. And he's one of the ones who has so far. Tank King, Storm Miller, also in that room, are going to have a chance to possibly contribute. One guy who keeps coming up is defensive lineman edge Bryce Perry Wright. It was a big recruiting win for the Aggies out of Georgia. He's gone up against the first team offensive line a couple times in the spring and had some success. Definitely at least held his own. 6'2", 253 pounds with some ability with his leverage and his power. I think he's a guy that you're going to be able to see on the field. And then one of the highest ranked guys in the class, a 5-star plus last year, was cornerback Brandon Arrington. And every tool that you would want in the book, 6'2" plus, ran 10.21 in the 100-meter dash. Still kind of polishing his game, but he's flashed this spring. He had some great battles with Aaron Gregory during that spring game. And so I think, Arrington, probably not a guy you'll see start, but certainly be able to get some run this year.
Yeah, Brandon Arrington, he came on this channel, gave us an interview. I think maybe committed on our channel. I don't remember, but he's got the mindset of somebody that's going to come in and make an early impact. I mean, he said it. If I'm coming from California to play in Texas, then I better be playing early. So Brandon Arrington, he could play some wide receiver too. Didn't he star on that side of the ball in high school?
Yeah, he did. But I think right now with him learning that cornerback position,
Yeah.
as many reps as he can get there, focus on that position. His upside is so high. I mean, that's a guy who could go in the top half of the draft someday. So I think he get his feet wet this year and then let that upside kind of take off next year.
All right, Texas A&M fans, you guys talk to us. You tell us who will make an early impact in College Station. Let us know. Comment section below.